What do farmers need to embrace regenerative agriculture? By Alex Rabender. A decade ago, an autoimmune condition I had been struggling with finally relented when I adopted a carnivore ketogenic diet. The approach was well outside the mainstream of either the public health or environmental conversation at the time, and a growing body of peer-reviewed work is only now beginning to take the underlying mechanisms seriously. That experience reshaped my career. Over the following years, I worked across nearly every stakeholder group in the sustainable food system. Inside a Danone portfolio that included Activia, Oikos, Silk, and International Delight. At food waste nonprofits like Refed, and in government and impact investment roles. What kept catching my attention was how reflexively each of these institutions oriented around plant-based alternatives, often at the expense of livestock systems that, when properly managed, are essential to ecological resilience and human health alike. So, I went looking for the science that did not shy away from animal agriculture. That search led me to rural Ohio, where I am now a graduate student at the Ohio State University's School of Environment and Natural Resources. My work is sociological rather than agronomic. I'm trying to understand what actually shapes the way farmers, and beef cattle producers in particular, decide whether to transition into regenerative grazing systems. I helped run a 7-wave statewide mailed survey of Ohio farmers, and I am now spending the spring driving around the Midwest speaking to farmers directly. I've been to 40 so far, with hopes of reaching 8 more before the month is out. What I have found, and what I think most readers will not expect, is that regenerative agriculture is best understood not as a farming technique, but as a private landowner's decision-making lens. Whether someone takes up cover cropping, no-till, rotational grazing, integrated crop livestock systems, or a general avoidance of unnecessary inputs that kill what wants to live, those choices flow from how a particular landowner weighs a particular set of constraints. Classical sociology captures most of them: infrastructure, access to capital and equipment, the scale of the operation, the economic and geographic context, whether the household relies on off-farm income, and on top of all that, who the operator is as a person and what they hope their land will become. The popular narrative casts farmers as the holdouts. That is not what the surveys or the field visits show. The producers I talk to are largely persuaded of the benefits. They understand the soil health gains, the ecological case, and the long-run logic. The reason they do not act on that conviction is rarely belief, but rather perceived profitability, material resources, and conditions. Wells, fencing, springs, and water lines are all components in the unglamorous capital stack that make rotational grazing or an integrated livestock system viable in the first place. A farmer who cannot run reliable water to a paddock cannot rotate cattle through it, no matter how much he or she values the practice. The systems we have built reinforce this gap. Conventional production sits atop decades of accreted infrastructure, capital channels, and policy support, and alternative practices begin at a real material disadvantage. But those systems are still responsive, and the lever they respond to is demand. This is where consumers come in, and it is where I want to be careful, because the conversation about how to support farmers has gotten a little decorative. Farmers markets are wonderful, and I do not want to be ungenerous about them. But it helps to be honest about what they are. They are a taste test. They are a community development tool, an introduction, a handshake. They are not in themselves the demand signal that shifts a producer's risk math. The signal that does is a household that knows a farmer by name and buys from them in volume, a quarter, a half, or side of beef into a deep freezer at home. The American Grass-Fed Association maintains a producer directory. I have no affiliation. That is a reasonable starting point for finding nearby ranchers raising cattle in ways likely to conserve or rebuild topsoil. The freezer is the unlock. Once it is in your basement, the per-pound cost drops considerably. The relationship deepens, and the producer gets the kind of cash flow that justifies selling direct in the first place. Many will have a wait list. That is a good sign. It also helps to remember who you are talking to. Only about 7% of American farms are supported entirely by farm income. The rest of those households piece things together with off-farm jobs or a hybrid of the two. We say we want farmers to care more about regenerative practices, but a farmer whose attention is split across 2 or 3 income streams cannot give the land the focus it deserves. Every direct relationship between a household and a producer is a small step toward letting that producer be a farmer full-time again. On this point, I will allow myself one firm view. Real regenerative agriculture has to include livestock. You can conserve soil and slow its loss without animals, but you cannot truly restore it. The increase in carbon and water retention, and available nutrients, and biological vitality all come back through ruminants on grass. Solving farming is about more than telling farmers it is important. We have come a long way, and the buy-in on their end is largely there. What will carry us across the finish line is something quieter and more local. Communities that know their growers, and the small, durable connections between a consumer and a farmer that turn good principles into a working agrarian economy. If you enjoyed this piece, follow the Bully Pulpit on Substack and ACC National on all other social media platforms. Join us in the arena, building the conservative environmental movement.